teacher to identify your novelty, and then you have your proposal defense, whether there is correction or no correction. It depends. Some faculty are very strict on this proposal defense, just like VIVA. Some are a little bit lenient. And once you succeed in your proposal defense, you can start your research work, collecting all the data that is needed, analyze your data, and then start your thesis writing, and also publish some papers, which is also requirement for your submission at UTM. Then only you can submit. But to tell you the truth, how successful is the VIVA Bose depends on your thesis, the quality of your thesis. If you have a very good high quality of thesis, not only in terms of writing, but also the content of it, then your VIVA Bose will be easy. And there's nothing much for you to do after that. But if your writing is poor, either because you do not know how to write, or because the content is poor, then your VIVA will be tough. And then, of course, after VIVA, there will be correction depending on the level of your thesis and how the examiner feel about your thesis. You have to do correction, and then you do your final submission, and then you will be awarded. So, again, I want to stress here, especially for those who are very new in your PhD. So this portion of your PhD work is very, very critical, and that will have significant impact on your VIVA session. Okay, but for those of you who has already submitted your thesis, then you should prepare well in order for you to have a smooth VIVA. Okay, looking at the time, it says that this session is up to 1 o'clock, but I don't think I will have that much material to present. But maybe later on we can have a long question and answer session. If any of you got any further question from my talk or things out beyond my talk today. So today my talk will cover I will give you some introduction. Just now, it was only what do you call it? A brief intro to the intro. Okay, but I will have some introduction, and then what to do long before VIVA. This is starting from your enrollment, or this is basically on your PhD work. And then as the time comes closer, how should you prepare your VIVA? And what you should do on the day of VIVA? And what happened after the VIVA? And then we conclude the session. So these are the things which I will discuss today with you. Share some of my experience with my student, and also as examiner, either internal or local examiner. Okay, let me start with introduction. So what is a PhD? Or maybe if you're doing your master by research, what is master by research actually? What are they? Someone told me that these two degrees, master by research or PhD, is an unfair degree. It is not similar degree if you do your undergraduate or if you do your master by thought course. Because for undergraduate or master thought course, you have the same lecturer, you have about the same courses, the same test, the same assignment, the same homework, the same examination, final examination, they are all the same. But for your PhD or your master by research, you have different supervisor with different style. You have different topic. Some may be very difficult, some may not be that difficult. You will have different examiner in your VIVA. Some may be very strict, some may be very lenient. So all these differences make PhD or your master by research an unfair degree. But that is how it works. There's nothing that we can do to make it fair. But there are also, of course, there are guidelines and policy for your supervisor, for your examiner, for the School of Graduate Study to look. So these are the guidelines in order for us to make sure that you have a relatively fair degree. But if you look in detail, they are actually different. Different people will have different difficulties. Some people has to go with their experimental work. Some experiment dealing with microorganism is quite difficult. Sometimes the microbes die. The experiment also takes very, very long compared to those who are working with chemical process, which is very short. These are examples which I can give from my background. So these are the differences that we should aware of. And of course, this is sometimes people say that this is a lonely journey because you want to discuss this with your friend, but they may not know what you were working on. The only person who may know about what you work is your supervisor. Okay, so there's not that many people for you to discuss with. But I think even though this is something which is real, but in some faculties or in some school, they have their research group. So maybe you can discuss your issue, your problem with your colleagues. Maybe they are not in depth to what you do, but they can give you, especially maybe your senior can give you some advice. And of course, lastly, you can seek your supervisor advice if you are stuck to something. Oops, sorry. I am having problem. I don't want to anecdote. Okay. So that's a very simple, brief characteristic of a PhD or master by research work. So what is expected, especially in a PhD holder? This is something which I focus on PhD holder, but for master holder, the expectation is less. But for a PhD holder, we expect the person to know his field thoroughly. Okay. And his PhD work make a useful contribution to the field. Okay, this is important because in doing PhD or master by research, the key word for the success of your work is novelty. So by having this novelty, meaning that your work must contribute to certain degree of knowledge, which is useful for those who are involved in that field. And if your work involve certain techniques, in analytical work or in data analysis, so you should be able to master that technique. And then, of course, from along the way you did your PhD, you have to communicate, whether in the VIVA presentation or if you are collecting data from others, then you should be able to know how to communicate with others in a professional manner. And the good thing of a PhD holder is that because you has contributed significantly to the field, that this is by having something that you made on your own. This is the novelty. Again, this is something to do with the novelty. And all those things, this should be reflected during your VIVA. Okay, the examiner will be asking you not only on the particular work that you are doing, but they will also be asking you general questions that they feel you should know because this is your field. And if it involves certain techniques, they will be asking you, looking into or asking you detailed question on how you do your work. This is how good is your methodology, how accurate is your methodology, your techniques. So this requires you to master the techniques. Okay, so these are expected for the PhD holder, and this will be assessed during the VIVA. So what is VIVA VOCE actually? So normally we just say VIVA, but the full term of it is VIVA VOCE. So it is actually originally from Latin. It is basically an oral examination, and it is for academic qualification. This is for PhD or for master by research. If you present something for your in a seminar, or that is not or a short project, that is not called viva voce. Viva voce is specifically for academic. It is for your PhD assessment or your master by research assessment. And in US, they call it thesis defense, because viva is actually defending your thesis. VIVA is actually defending your thesis. So actually, the title for this talk should be VIVA preparation, not VIVA defense preparation, because you don't defend your VIVA, you defend your thesis. Okay, so this is VIVA preparation, or in the US, they call it thesis defense. And basically, you have submitted your thesis, how you want to defend your thesis to the examiner. So that is VIVA VOCE. So why do we have to go through VIVA? Why is it so important that your PhD work or your master by research has to go through VIVA? First, we want to examine the candidate's knowledge of the subject matter. How good are they? Do they really know their work, or they know only little? Okay, so we want to examine the level of knowledge that the student has. And because they have written something, which is their thesis, so we want to make sure that they really understand what they write. Okay, and they can defend it verbally, because we have already read the written thesis, but we want to see, can they defend it orally. So it is very important in the preparation of the thesis that you understand each and every word and sentences that you put in your thesis. It is not just something compiling any information in order to make the thesis stick. That is not the point. Okay, the thesis that you write, you have to understand whatever word that you use. You need to understand why that word is there and why that phrase is there. And also, we want to check the quality of your work. Okay, we want to check the quality of your work, and normally, in most cases, there are things that has been written by the student but cannot be understood by the examiner. So we want to clarify what they are. Okay, we want to clarify what did you write in your thesis. So VIVA is also, in a positive way, it is an opportunity for you to defend your thesis in person. Can you imagine if there is no VIVA, you have submitted your thesis to the examiner, and suddenly you get the result that you fail your VIVA, your thesis failed, without knowing how to defend, without having the opportunity to defend it. Maybe the examiner have some misunderstanding of your work, which they're supposed to clarify with you before they make any decision. So without VIVA, this opportunity is not there. So this VIVA provide the opportunity for the student to defend their thesis should there be any inquiry by the examiner. And during this VIVA session, we will see through the way you answer the question, through the way you do your presentation, we will be able to know whether this work is your own work or not. There have been occasions where we detected student, the examiner detected student to copy some other people's work through this VIVA session. Okay, when they fail to answer, when they seem not to know what they do, so there is some fishy things there, and a room for us to investigate further. So by having this VIVA, you should demonstrate that the thesis is your own work. And of course, by having VIVA, it helps us to ensure that there is no plagiarism involved in preparing the thesis. But actually, that goes beyond that, because if for you who have submitted your thesis, you know that you have to check your thesis in, turn it in for plagiarism test. But also, VIVA is a second wall of defense to check that there is no plagiarism in your thesis. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why we have to VIVA the student after they submit their thesis. Okay, a brief procedure at UTM. Before, maybe around, I think, about a year or less, student has to submit their thesis submission notification. Okay, this is a very simple notification. You submit your abstract. This abstract is not a final abstract in your thesis, but this abstract will tell the examiner who we want to select about the work that you are doing, so they know whether they are suitable or not to be the examiner for your thesis. So the students submit their thesis with their abstract in using GSMS, and this is normally done a minimum, I think, 3 months before you submit your thesis, or at least 1 year before you submit your thesis. So when you submit your thesis online, your notification online, your supervisor will be notified, and he will have to suggest 3 internal and 3 external examiner. And School of Graduate Study will contact those examiner who are ready to be your examiner. And then, not everybody is ready. Sometimes some of the examiner may feel that the title, based on the title and the abstract, the thesis is not within his expertise. Or sometimes the examiner already got so many theses to be examined, so they are not ready. And at the end of the day, there will be normally 1 internal and 1 external appointed as your examiner. And when the day comes, you will submit your thesis. And before submission, you have to make sure that the format is correct and the thesis has been verified by your supervisor. After that, the thesis will be sent to the examiner. They will read your examiner. Some examiner took very short time. In 2 weeks' time, they are ready to submit the report. Some may take maybe 1 to 3 months to read because they are busy. But at the end of the day, before the VIVA, they will submit their report. And then we will set the date for the VIVA. And during the VIVA, we will get the results. And then you do the correction, which is approved either by the examiner, which we will discuss this later, or only by your supervisor. And once things are ready, everything is okay, so you will be awarded with your PhD. So this is the brief procedure of submission, PhD, and also master by research. They are the same. Okay, before you submit your thesis, this is a requirement by UTM. You must publish. Okay, you must publish. As for now, if you are doing your MSc by research, you must have at least 1 publication accepted in journal, article, or conference proceeding or book chapter. At least one. But the more the better. Actually, by having more publication prior to your VIVA, it indicates how novel is your work, how good is your work, that it has been accepted by a publisher. It is not that easy to have your papers accepted, especially if you are talking about good article, a good journal. Okay, so for master, from any journal or from conference proceeding or book chapter. But for PhD, the requirement is more difficult. You should publish at least one index article. By index article means it is published in Scopus, the minimum, or if you are working on social science, it is in ERA. But the best if you can submit your work in Web of Science. This is the one with the impact factor. And if you can publish in Q1 or Q2 journal, that is excellent. Okay, so these are the publication requirement before you can submit your thesis. If you don't have this publication, although your thesis have been completed, it will not be accepted by the postgraduate office. Okay, after you submit, and then the examiner has written back their report, from there, the postgraduate office will decide whether you are eligible or not for VIVA. Okay, this is in UTM only. So one, they will set the date for the external, internal examiner, and also your supervisor. These are the people that must be there during the VIVA. You are not called for the defense if you get an E grade or the examiner found that you plagiarize. E means fail. By just looking at your thesis, they found that it is very bad thesis, na'udzubillah, or they found that they detected some plagiarism which failed to be detected by Turnitin. So if this happened, you will not be called for VIVA. Or if you got a C or D grade, which is not good, given by one of the examiner, we will explain later on what is meant by C or D. So during the VIVA, a representative from SPS will attend your defense. I am not sure why, but that is the procedure. So this is the eligibility of your VIVA, whether you're eligible or not, after the report from the examiner has been obtained. So who are the examiners? They are, as you mentioned just now, they are proposed by your supervisor. They should be at the same or higher level than the supervisor, at least one. For example, if your supervisor is a professor, at least one of the examiner must be a professor. If your supervisor is an associate professor, at least one of the examiner must be an associate professor. If your supervisor is a senior lecturer, basically he can assign anybody or propose anybody to be the examiner. Preferably, examiner should be in the same field of study. And normally, your supervisor will nominate those whom he know. Okay, and this same field of study is very important. For example, let's say my student is working on chemical oxidation to treat wastewater. I must be very careful in order not to choose examiner from chemistry background. Because I am a civil engineer, the student is working on civil environmental engineering field. So the field is more on application. So if the examiner is from chemistry, so the tendency is that he will be questioning on the chemistry aspect.
Cara nak hadap proposal di present. Apa?
Okay. Okay, sorry. So going back to the just now, if we take somebody with chemistry background from, for example, Faculty of Science, Department of Chemistry, then there is a tendency that the question will be more on the chemistry aspect of the study, which is not the point that is being emphasized during the study. So it will be unfair to the student. Or although it is chemical oxidation, by putting examiner from chemical engineering field may also not be good for the student. So as much as possible is to look for somebody with the same background, environmental engineering, and if possible, working on the physicochemical process. Okay, so this is very important for the supervisor to choose. Otherwise, it will be a pity to the student. So normally they depend on the university. Some university they are quite strict. They have already set the VIVA date tentatively, and they give you at least the examiner a month to read the thesis. UTM they are quite lenient, although they set a certain deadline, but normally they are not, they are open to the examiner. If the examiner has any problem to complete reading the thesis in the set period of time, he can extend it. But for some university, they are very strict on this, which is good because then it will the student won't have to wait for so long before the VIVA. Okay, they will provide the report to SPS before or on the day of VIVA. So this is why what I call the unfairness. It depends. Some examiner are friendly. Some are very interested in your work. Some are very detail-minded, looking at very detail of your thesis. And some are very critical, always looking at the weak point of your thesis. So you cannot do much on this, but just make doa so that you will get a good examiner. Good examiner means that he is critical, but he will not jeopardize you. For me, when I did my sharing of my experience, when I have my VIVA, I did my PhD in UK. My examiner was quite critical. My external examiner was quite critical, and he asked me quite a lot of questions. And really, after the VIVA, I really feel down. I feel like I won't be able to pass through this VIVA. But luckily, after when the results was announced, I had very minor correction to do. So he was critical, but that critical has a point whether he wants to see my understanding and he really want to test me on my work. So hopefully you will get the critical one, but at the same time they are also human. They will not be hard on you. Okay, that is the introduction actually. Now, before you go to your VIVA, this is especially good. This information is good for those who have just started who are doing your PhD work. So long before VIVA, as I mentioned just now, the success of your VIVA depends on your PhD work and thesis. Okay, it does not only depend on your thesis, but it also depends on the quality of your PhD work. If the quality of your PhD work is good and you write your thesis well, it is very easy for the examiner to read and understand your thesis, so your VIVA will not be long. Okay, but either your thesis is not well written or your PhD work is not well done, then the VIVA will be tough. So your PhD work, you must be good. I mean, This is very critical, the gaps of knowledge and novelty. This is the first thing which I normally ask and I normally look at in your PhD work. This is in your chapter 1. Okay, this is in your chapter 1, your problem statement and your objective. So this should reflect the gaps of knowledge and novelty. And then your methodology is good. You have sound methodology and your methodology is accepted by others. Okay, it is verified. There's no flaw in your methodology. Again, your data analysis is also good. Okay, you analyze your data properly. We will discuss a little bit on that later. And then your thesis write-up on your problem statement, your objective, your literature review, methodology, results and discussion, conclusion. This must be well written. And as I mentioned just now, the better your thesis write-up, the happier the examiner, the shorter the VIVA. If they don't understand your thesis, then they will ask a lot. And your VIVA will be longer. So what you should write, okay, first of all, your work need to be done properly. Gaps of knowledge and novelty need to be identified. You can pinpoint that this is the novelty of my work. You must express the novelty of your work in your thesis. And then your methodology must be good. There is no flaw in your methodology. Again, data analysis. Okay, let's look at the thesis write-up. I'm going through this because these are all things that are important before the VIVA. Okay, it is not only the VIVA that will decide the success of your PhD, but your PhD work and your thesis will decide how your work will be accepted. Okay, so for thesis examination, as I mentioned just now, the time is between 1 to 2 months, or maybe can go up to 4 months, and sometimes can go up to 6 months. Depend. And normally you will have 2 examiners, but under certain condition, for example, if you are working with UTM and you are doing your presentation, you work at UTM and you do your PhD at UTM, so you will have 3 examiners. Okay, in some university they have already set 3 examiners, but UTM we still have 1 internal and 1 external. So the novelty is should be shown in your problem statement, as I mentioned just now. You must specifically mention on the novelty of your work by saying that based on your literature review, you found that nobody has done on this aspect of work, or very little information is available on this. So you have to specifically mention this in your problem statement. So when examiner look at the problem statement, they are not looking at the problem. They are looking at the novelty. Many people, for example, you are working on certain technology. So people has also done many work on this technology or this technique. So what you find is missing from the previous work, and what is the one that you will fill up for the gap. Okay. So this novelty and knowledge gap is very important. Sorry, this problem statement and knowledge gap need to be specified in the problem statement. And then the objective for master, normally you can have 2 or 3 objectives, and for PhD normally 4, 3 can be accepted. The point of objective is that for each objective, it requires a substantial amount of work in order to establish that objective. If it is only literature review, then it cannot be objective. Objective requires substantial amount of work to be carried out to be fulfilled. Okay? It is reflected in your methodology. And each objective should carry sufficient novelty. If your novelty is very high at certain objective, then not all objective has to have novelty. Otherwise, each objective should have certain amount of novelty. And they need to be properly written, okay, so that it looks like objective. Then your literature review, the flow should be good. Okay, flow is very important in writing in order for the examiner to understand your work. Normally, the flow is to talk about bigger thing and then focusing, and deeper into what you are working on. Okay, we start with something which is more general and then more specific, more specific, more specific. That is normally the flow. And it should cover at least the work that you are doing, and it is better to cover a little bit more. Okay, not only cover on the one that you are working on, but a little bit more, but not too big, because otherwise it will be too thick. The literature review, whatever you write, should be relevant. You should have an object. You should know why I have this material in my literature review. Okay, you must know why you have this material in your literature review. It is not just to increase the thickness of the thesis. Whatever you write must have a reason, a purpose. You should include diagram and table in your literature review. Sufficient and updated references. This is also important. Many students, they say that based on recent study, and this is 2021, but their recent is dated 2013. So that is not recent. If this is 2021, at least it should be 2019. Unless the recent one is really not available. But that has to be mentioned in the thesis. Otherwise, you should update your reference as much as possible to include the recent reference. Of course, you started your study in 2018, but you're submitting your thesis in 2021, so your literature review should cover up to 2021. Okay? It is not sufficient up to 2018 because that has already been passed. And normally, it is good to have some summary table after your discussion, because this table is better for us to look at, easier for us to understand. So don't just keep writing and writing and writing without diagram and table. Diagram and table is needed to help us to understand the work better. And then you have your conclusions and the needs of research. This should be included in the literature review. This needs of research actually summarize back the novelty of the gap of knowledge and also the novelty of your work. And then we go to methodology. So normally you should have a research framework where when we look at the research framework, we can see the whole picture of your work. Okay, the whole picture of your work is presented in your research framework. And normally, it is good to follow the standard procedure. What is the standard procedure? You can see the standard procedure when you reach research article. If it is experimental work, normally they will have equipment and material, they will have analytical method, and then they follow, then they have the procedures. It is not according to, only procedures will follow your objective. The rest is not following your objective. Meaning that equipment, you just tell us what are the equipment that you use, the model, the brand and the model type, what are the material that you use. These are all in one subsection. And then what are the analytical method that you use? All the analysis that you work, the method has to be put under this analytical method. And then if you have specific data analysis work, Then there should be another one is data you can have it before procedure or after procedure. Then these procedures follow your objective. Okay, when you describe your procedure, it follows the objective. Objective 1, how do you achieve? What is the procedure for objective 1? What is the procedure for objective 2? What is the procedure of objective 3? And so on and so forth. You don't write your methodology according to your procedure. Meaning that for objective 1, this is the equipment, this is the analytical method, this is the procedure. And then objective 2, analytical equipment, analytical method, and procedure. You don't write it like that. Because if you write it like that, there will be some redundancy. Some equipment that you use for objective 2 may have already been explained in discussing the objective 1. So there will be repetition and the flow will not be good. Okay, so it is better that only procedure follow the objective, the rest should go in their own subsection. Okay, so the methodology need to be explained in detail. We found many problems in understanding the student methodology. And when we found problem with methodology, it will be difficult for us to follow your results and discussion. Okay, so many times I have problem with understanding your results because the methodology is not clear. So make sure that the methodology, the detail of it, all of it is there. All the data, why you use that value, what are the value being used as a control, all those must be written in detail. And you must remember that when people read your methodology, they can duplicate your work. This is a must. Don't say, oh, my work is something secret. If it is secret, still you have to have it detailed, because to protect the secretness of your work is at the front of your thesis. You will have option whether we can make the thesis public or we can hold the thesis from public. Okay, you have to put justification. That is at the front page of your thesis. But still then, the methodology need to be put in detail. And if you use any technique, it should be based on established method or standard method. Or at least if it is done by other researchers previous you, then you should write that this follow the work of certain and certain writer or paper. So it cannot be just on your own, because if you want to establish your new method, then you have to have a technique to make sure that that method is okay. Otherwise, use the method standard that has already been established by previous work or being published in any document. And not last, results and discussion. Again, discussion should follow the objective. Okay, if you have objective 1, so results and discussion must discuss objective 1 results first, and then objective 2, objective 3, and so on. And the results should be arranged in order in the way that it can be easily understood. If the first result is important for you to explain the second results, then the first result should be explained first, followed by the second results. And in the discussion, you should compare your finding with others. This is very important. You should justify the results. Why you get that pattern of results? Why it is not like this? Why it is like that? Justify the results from your literature review. Okay, you have done your literature review. So that literature review that you have published, that you have written in your chapter 2, you need to call them back and explain them again, use them to justify the results. And use them also to compare your results with others. This is what the purpose of having literature review in your chapter 2. Again, before I forget, chapter 2 should not be written like a textbook. It is not something general things. The literature review should be based on previous study, previous work. So you should capture their results and have them in your chapter 2. And then for PhD and master bar research, statistical analysis is a must. Okay, or either you conduct your experiment using statistical method or not, but the results must be analyzed statistically. And then if you have table, figure or photo, you need to mention them in text before they appear in your thesis, and you should discuss them. You should not leave the table to be analyzed, to be looked at, to be figured out by the reader themselves. You must explain the table in your narrative. Okay, so have this table, figure, photo shown after you mention them in text and discuss them. If you don't discuss them, that is wrong. Okay, and for conclusion, conclusion is very simple. It is not actually summary of your results. It is not a new discussion. It is basically you get from your discussion just now and you use it to answer your objective. If you have 3 objectives, you should have 3 conclusions only. Conclusion 1, answer objective 1. Conclusion 2, answer objective 2. Conclusion 3, answer objective 3. And it has to be properly written. You can have it in paragraphic form, you can have it in point form, you can have it in number. But eventually, it depends on your examiner. Some examiner prefer to have narrative rather than point form. Some examiner have different preference. So at the end of the day, if the examiner is happy with what you have, so you are lucky. If not, you may have to do some adjustment. But if you don't answer your objective, definitely you will have to rewrite all your conclusion again. And then we have recommendation. So recommendation is actually to write down things that you feel necessary to be carried out in the future. Maybe you feel that there are some things that you should do for your study, but because of time limitation, it was not being carried out. So that can be put in your recommendation. And that recommendation must be closely related to your work. Okay, this recommendation is not for example, okay, I recommend the Department of Environment should do this. This is not recommendation. The recommendation is for work to be done in the future related to what you have done in your study. That is recommendation. And then you should have your references cited in the text. It is a must. And you should follow the format given by UTM. Okay, should follow the format given in UTM, and in the reference line, you should have it arranged. If you use the method, you put the name, which is better. Actually, it's better to put the name of the writer, the last name of the writer, and then the year, rather than using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because then, if there is any changes, sometimes it's become difficult to change. And if you have the name, using the name, so in the reference, you have all the names given, and they should be arranged in alphabetical manner. And then in the appendices, you should include all relevant material, which are your analytical procedure, if they are not in your methodology, questionnaires, if you are using questionnaires. In the results and discussion, you only put the process results. You don't put the raw data. So the details result, the raw data should be in the appendix. And if there is any more photos that you want to add, they also should be in the appendix. And lastly, but This depends. Sometimes it is acceptable, sometimes it is not acceptable. List of publication that you have come out from your research work only, not research work of your friend, but you have your name there. That should not be listed in your publication. That is not your publication. Your publication is the one with your name in the first one as the first writer, and the second, the corresponding author is your supervisor. That is your work. Other than that, that is not considered as your list of publication. You can have that in your CV, but that is not acceptable for your list of publication for VIVA and thesis submission. Okay, general language is very important so that the examiner can read your thesis easily. If you give hard time to the examiner to read your thesis, then they will give you hard time during the VIVA. Okay, remember this, very simple. If you give them good time, they will also give you good time. Okay, so check your language. If possible, send your thesis for proofread before you submit. Don't expect your supervisor to proofread your language because he will not have time. And then the format should follow UTM format and they should be uniform, because sometimes UTM can have different format and you should stick to only one format. If you use this format throughout the thesis, you must follow that format. Cannot mix the format. If you use English style, British style, you should use British style all the way. Don't mix British and American. Okay? These are general comment. Okay, these are all the things that is important before your VIVA. Because if all these are being carried out properly, nicely, then when you submit your thesis, when your supervisor, your examiner read your thesis, they are happy with your thesis, then again and again I mentioned that your VIVA will be easy. If not, your VIVA will be difficult. Okay, so for those of you who has not submitted your thesis yet, so make sure you follow my advice. Okay, now as the VIVA date get closer, you have been given your time for VIVA, date and time, so now your heart start pounding. Oh, VIVA is coming. Oh, okay, this is normal. If you know your date of VIVA and nothing happened in your heart, something is wrong with you, better go and see the doctor. Okay, so pounding, nervous, fear is something which is normal when you get your date of VIVA. So what you have to do is to prepare. Okay, so that anxiety can be reduced. Okay, before we go into the detail, you need to think in a wider scope. These are the general questions that is normally asked by the examiner in the beginning to get some warm up. And actually, they want to see how well you know your area. Okay? The question may be different than this, but these are some of the questions. One is that which overarching philosophical or theoretical assumption have you been working with? Why you use that assumption and how did it work out in your study? And then maybe they will ask, if you now you are doing blah blah blah, so if you want to continue your work, what do you think you will do? Or what would you do differently if you were starting again? Okay, I think I have done something wrong. I wish I can restart again and do. This is just our wishes. And they want also to see whether you update with the current news in your field, current knowledge in your field. Okay, and this is what I say, that in your literature review, it should be current. Okay. Then how does your work benefit the country and the humanity? And actually, when you do your research, when you pick your topic, make sure that your topic is practical. Okay, of course, in academic line, you can do anything from sea to sky, but you also need to think of the practicability of it. Okay, if it is not practical, should you waste time on that? Of course, you have good results, but unfortunately, they are not applicable later on because they are not practical. So before you start anything, it is good to see how your work benefit the country and the humanity. And this is also one of the general question that can be asked during the beginning of your VIVA. And if we go into detail, as I mentioned just now, one of the things that you should do, you should know your thesis very well. Every sentence, every paragraph, you should know why they are there. If I remove them from the thesis, will it jeopardize the thesis? Is it that important for you to have it there? And then, of course, you should know what you have done, why you have do it, what have you found, what are the implications, or what can be implied from your finding. Okay? And in knowing your thesis well, when it comes back to your VIVA, reread your thesis carefully. Okay? Reread again and again. Don't be bored. At least you read twice before your VIVA. From page 1 up to the last page. And I can bet you, once you read it again, you will find many mistakes. Even when it comes to submission, this is something normal because once you leave your thesis for a while, when you read again, then you can see the mistake because you are now a new person. But you need to read your thesis again before the VIVA. Okay, if you notice any mistake, don't be panic. Oh, I'm dead now. No, just make a note of them. Provide, if possible, you can provide the list to the examiner and address them in your final correction. If it is not big mistake. If it is big mistake, I do not know what to do. Then you are in big trouble. But I hope it is not up to that. Identify areas of weakness in your thesis. Identify the element of originality in your thesis. Okay, one thing is that sometimes because the examiner, they read your thesis only once. And sometimes because of their busyness, they may not read it in detail. So sometimes it is there in the thesis, but they fail to see it. Okay, so that is normal. So you yourself, okay, as I mentioned just now on the originality, on the novelty, you should make sure where is in your thesis that it describe on the originality or novelty of your work and other element as well. Identify your contribution to knowledge. Identify the theoretical, research, practical implications of your findings. So these are the things that we expect to listen from you. Okay, now in the VIVA, you are given 20 to 30-minute presentation. This presentation is very important. If your thesis is very well written, then this presentation will strengthen your thesis. If your thesis is poorly written, the examiner is expected to find things that they don't understand during your presentation. But if your presentation is the same as your poor writing, then they will have lots of questions for you. Okay, so this presentation, although it takes only 20 to 30 minutes, but it is important. And then it depends if your presentation is good. So sometimes from my experience, they let you go even beyond beyond the time because they are interested with your work. But if your presentation is bad, then they will look at the time. And some even ask you to shorten your presentation time. Okay, so make sure that you present well, prepare well for your presentation. So in the introduction, you highlight on your problem statement, novelty, and objective. In the literature review, you highlight on the summary of your literature review. You don't have to say anything. You only put some summary on the works that have been done in different areas, and also again highlight the novelty of your work from the review. In the methodology, you show them your research framework and if needed, some necessary details of your methodology. And in results and discussion, highlight only the important findings. Okay, don't try to show everything. And in presentation, reduce the amount of time for introduction. Don't waste your time on introduction. Stress more on problem statement and objective. Problem statement and objective. Reduce maybe less than 1 minute or 1 minute on the introduction part. Okay. And then on the conclusion and recommendation, again, answer the objective and what's lacking that you think should be done in the future. This is VIVA presentation. So this is something which I have put in my class previously. For those of you who has sit in my class, keep it simple, minimize use of text, minimize animation, high quality graphic, appropriate use of chart and graph, efficient use of color, use of appropriate font in terms of type and size. Okay, these are poor slide, too crowdy. This is also poor slide because the font is bad and it is too wordy. This is also poor because the background is black, it's dark, and the text is also black. So all this should not be used. If you want to use color to communicate. Don't use color for decoration. Okay, for example, because we're talking about different type, environmental sustainability. This is different areas, so we put in different colors so that we can distinguish between the area. Okay, there are so many information here. Are they really needed for the presentation, or should we just highlight the one that we want to explain during the presentation? The same goes with this. Can we just reduce the amount of data that we want to show up to the one that is important? But as an example in our discussion, in our presentation, this is 3D graph, which is difficult to read. Better to use a normal 2D graph. Okay, you can look at the data. This is a bad style of data because the axis is not the same. You can put it in one graph or you can have the same scale, so immediately we can see the difference. The same goes with this one. This is too crowded. It is better to enhance it. This is before. It is also difficult to see, to look at the difference. You make it easier for the examiner to differentiate between the dark period and light period and the blue and the red. So all this thing is done so that the examiner can understand your presentation better. Okay, some of the mistakes during VIVA presentation. No interaction with the panel, meaning that when you present, you don't look at the panel. You look at your slide or you look at the computer, you look at the wall. This is very bad. You make the examiner feel like they are not there. Okay, so look at the panel. Don't be afraid. Stare at their eyes. Okay, have eye contact with them. But this is okay. This is something which I described during the physical VIVA. It is different if it is online VIVA because you won't be able to see the panel during the presentation session. Okay, badly prepared slide. Okay, the one that I show you just now. And then your presentation is not focused. You cannot follow the flow of your presentation, or you are talking too soft or too fast. We cannot catch what you want to say. Presentation unnecessarily too long. Okay, this will be stopped by the examiner, by the chairman, if it is too long. Actually, they will be very strict. If they say 30 minutes, by 28 minutes, they will tell you you have only 2 minutes. You should hurry up, and then by 30 minutes, they will stop you. Unless your presentation is very good and they are, you put so much interest on them, then they will follow. Poor flow again, as I mentioned just now. Language problem, you cannot speak English properly, or your accent is difficult to be understood by the examiner. That is also a problem. And then your presentation is boring. Okay, so these are some mistakes during VIVA presentation. So try to avoid this. Okay, before you VIVA, it is a must for you to have mock VIVA. Mock VIVA is a test, a practice with your supervisor. If you have co-supervisor, have your co-supervisor attend it too. And for SKA recently, or UTM, I think, they have required mock VIVA. You should nominate two, your supervisor will nominate 2 of his colleagues to be in that mock VIVA. Okay, this mock VIVA is important for you to practice your presentation and also practice to accept questions from examiner. So if you have your supervisor, if you have your supervisor's colleagues, or your colleague yourself, ask them to ask you questions. Invite difficult and critical questions. Okay, don't ask somebody that are quiet. Okay, any question? No, everything is good. That is bad. Look for your enemy. Who is your enemy? Then they will ask them to ask you difficult question that can fail you, so you can practice. Okay, so try to do it at least 2 weeks from the date of VIVA. For my student, I normally ask them to have 2 times VIVA. So for the first VIVA, I will give my comment and questions, and then I will see their second VIVA. Has that been improved or not? Okay, so this hopefully you will know your VIVA date earlier, so that you can have your mock VIVA earlier. Okay, now last few days before the VIVA, maybe 2-3 days before the VIVA. So this is the time to address practical details, such as, okay, for practical, physical VIVA, you will need to think of how will you get to the VIVA in good time, at least 30 minutes before the VIVA. If you don't have any transport, arrange transport. When will you eat and drink, both before and after VIVA? So it is easy to say eat well, sleep well, but from my experience as well, when you have only few days for VIVA, your heart will be pounding more, and you will feel more anxiety, and you will have less appetite to eat and also to drink. And sometimes you don't even sleep well. The Malay says that mandi tak basah, makan tak kenyang. Okay, in English they said even if you take bath, it will not wet you. If you eat, it will not fill your stomach. So this happened before, when the day of your VIVA come closer, for normal people. For abnormal people, I do not know, because I am normal people. Okay, what will you wear? Okay, ideally something that allows you to feel both smart and comfortable. Okay, so suitable to our climate. You can wear your, normally for men, they will wear your tie and also your shirt, and sometimes they wear blazer. But some students, they also like to wear their national clothing. Okay, this is also acceptable, except that I've never seen any Malay who wear baju Melayu for the VIVA yet. But for Nigerian, they wear their for Nigerian, Pakistani, I've seen them wearing their national custom and national clothing. Okay, what will you take into the room with you? Okay, this is for physical, yeah, physical VIVA. Okay, think positively. Most students who reach this stage succeed in their PhD. Okay, once you get to your VIVA, most of them, I would say 99.9% pass their PhD. Of course, there are some very small percentage which fail their PhD. That is also happening, but very small percentage. And of course, lots of prayers for Muslim and any religion. Pray so that things will be easy for you. So VIVA checklist. I know my thesis thoroughly. I'm able to explain how my thesis fits into the bigger picture. This is the one that I mentioned earlier, the general question. I have kept up to date with relevant literature. I have updated my literature review, my data, my reference are all up to date. I know the implication of my research to both theory and practice, how they can be implied. I have had a mock VIVA with my supervisor. I have asked my peers to quiz and challenge me about my thesis. I have explained my thesis to friends and family who are not familiar with it. If you are able to explain your thesis to your friends and familiar who doesn't have any background and they understand your work, you are excellent. Okay, you are excellent. I have produced a list of likely questions and of course the answer to. And I have identified areas of my thesis that are likely to be challenged. I have marked my thesis to help me refer to it in the VIVA. So your thesis should be marked properly. Okay, with all those marker, whatever type of marker that you want to use. Where is the important point that you think will be asked, mark it so that you don't have to flip the pages like you do not know where it is. It is bad in front of the examiner. Okay, so now on the day of VIVA, so who do you think is the candidate? Is it the woman or is it the man? It can be either way. Okay, maybe the examiner, the candidate is relaxed, and his or her spouse, which is in anxiety, or the other way around. On the day of VIVA, okay, make sure you do the VIVA in good time, 30 minutes early as we planned just now. Eat well, sleep well, hopefully you can do that. Okay, you have decided before what you want to wear, so wear something that allow you to feel both smart and comfortable. And again, maintain your thought, think positively. Inshallah, you will feel you pass your VIVA, either master or PhD. And lots of prayers. Not only you make prayers, but ask your family members also to make prayers for you, and your friend as well. Okay, who knows whose prayer will be accepted? Okay, what to bring? Of course, bring pen and paper. This is again physical VIVA. Take notes on long question, okay, so that you can take down whatever question given to you if you want to answer them later. Take your own copy of the thesis which is similar to the one submitted into the VIVA. Okay, it happened that the student come with a different copy of thesis than the one that they submitted, or maybe they submitted a wrong version of their thesis. Then there will be some problem, because it is problem during the VIVA when we want to refer to the pages, or it can also be difficult when you want to do the correction later on, because normally the correction will be based on the copy that is given to the examiner. And as I mentioned just now, annotate your thesis with post-it notes so that you can find particular section of your work on points that you anticipate wanting to elaborate further. And examiner may request to see your data. Okay, the data is supposed to be in your uh, in your appendix, but if they are not there, bring them along for the VIVA. If it is online VIVA, although nobody see what you wear, but I highly recommend that you dress up as if you are presenting in person, because this will affect the mood. It will affect your mood. If you wear only the top is stylish, but the bottom is you wearing kind placard or for example pajamas, that actually will have some effect on your mental, your perception. Okay, it is better to dress up so that you will feel you are ready. You will feel the importance of this VIVA. And of course, it is important that you have good Wi-Fi connection during the VIVA. We don't want to lose you during the VIVA because it will be difficult if that happens. Okay, make sure you are in a place where you have good internet connection. In my last VIVA, which I became the examiner, the student he put himself in a hotel because he said hopefully he get a good hotel, because that is one of the way for him to make sure that he has a good internet connection. Okay, so make sure you have good internet connection. If you feel that your house have a good internet connection, then stay at home. If not, go and find the location where the internet connection is good. Good equipment, make sure that test, because what normally happen with online VIVA is that, or online communication is that when you speak up, the one on the other side does not hear you. Okay, so make sure test all your equipment that they are good. Okay, and also familiarize with the apps, whether we are using Zoom or WebEx or Team, Google, whatever. Make sure that you familiarize yourself with the apps. And if you are at home, make sure you use decent background. Like me, that is not my house background, that is the generic background that you can choose. So use decent background to protect your background. Okay, and also because this is online, so protect sensitive information, close unnecessary tabs and apps in your computer in case somebody may chip in unknowingly. And be early again, test everything as I mentioned just now. So this is if you are working online, VIVA. Okay, who will be present during the VIVA? I will be finished in, I think, 15 minutes, hopefully. Then we can go for question and answer. So who will be present in the VIVA? For most candidates, it will be the external and internal examiner. Most of the time, they will be there. But as I mentioned just now, for UTM staff, and if you are doing industrial doctoral or engineering doctoral, you will have one internal and two external examiner. Okay. For industrial doctoral and engineering doctoral, one of the examiner will be professional people. They will not be academician. Professional with expertise in the area of your research. Others include your supervisor. Normally, if you have 4 supervisors, normally only 2 supervisors will come, or at least the main supervisor should be there. That is a must for UTM. For some university, they don't invite the supervisor. But the supervisor will not be saying anything. They will just keep quiet unless they feel necessary to talk, and they will only talk with the permission of the chairman. If the chairman say, no, you cannot interfere, let us torture the student, so you cannot say anything. Okay, but normally it depends on the judgment of the chairman. So we will have a chairman to manage the VIVA session, and then at UTM for PhD, we will have assistant chairman to note down and preparing the report. For master, there will be no assistant chairman. The chairman will have to note down everything, all the question, and prepare the report. For PhD, the chairman must be a professor. Okay, the chairman must be a professor. For master, the chairman at least should be associate professor. That is in UTM. In some other universities, they are different. And the chairman doesn't have to be in the same field. In fact, it is better for the chairman not to be in the same field to avoid him from becoming examiner as well. Okay, so the chairman actually, he only manage the VIVA session. He is not supposed to examine the student, but of course he can give some idea to the student to help the student. And during the VIVA session, during the question and answer, normally the VIVA is held actually not to punish the student. Okay, I have shown you the reason why we have the VIVA session. So most of the time, as I experience, all the VIVA session is actually to help the student. If the student has done a good work, but the report or the thesis is bad, we will commend the student to improvise the thesis, in order to improvise the thesis, so that the thesis can be made public to the global world. Okay, and also we want to make sure that the student understand what he does. That is the purpose of this VIVA session. So normally we will try our best to help the student, even if we ask them question and we find that the student has difficulty to answer the question, we will help them. We will give them some tips, hint, in order for them to answer the question. Or sometimes the chairman even help to make sure that the student understand the question. Okay, so this is the physical. I saw some hands raised. Question and answer will be done after I finish my presentation. So if you have any question, please keep your question later on until the end of the presentation. Okay, this is for physical arrangement. We will have the student next to the screen at the end of the table, and we have the supervisor next to him or her. And in front of the student and the supervisor is the examiner. And then we have the chairman and the assistant chairman next to him. So this is the physical arrangement. Okay, so this is how it looks like. This is at the SPS VIVA office. This is the student who's giving his presentation. The supervisor is the one wearing the glasses. And then the examiner is on the opposite side, and the chairman is at the back with his back. And then I don't know, this seems to, it's supposed to be the assistant chairman on the left of the chairman. This is online VIVA. Okay, so there's no sitting arrangement, but we have the student. This is the student, and that is her supervisor, and that is the I am the examiner, one of the examiner. Okay. Okay, the VIVA procedure. This is for those of you who are about to have their VIVA soon. We start off with the introduction by the chairman. After everybody has already arrived, we start off with the introduction by the chairman. And then we, before we start, we will have a pre-VIVA discussion between the chairman and the examiners. During this time, the chairman and the examiners has all the results in the report. Previously, the supervisor also know. Can everybody turn off can be mute? So previously, the supervisor were also able to see the preliminary results, but nowadays they are not allowed. Only chairman and examiners see the results. And before we start the VIVA session, we will ask the student to leave the room or to leave the session. Okay, and then sometimes supervisors are allowed. Sometimes, most of the time, they are also asked to leave. Then we will discuss between the chairman and examiner to see what do we feel about the thesis. Is the work enough, fulfilling the scope of the VIVA? And if there is any dissimilarity between the examiner, maybe examiner internal give B2, external examiner give B1, different results, then they will ask, we will discuss on the reasons why we have that differences, and then we will decide whether should we allow the VIVA session to take place or not. Most of the time, of course, everybody is there, so we will allow the session to continue. Then we invite the student and the supervisor back. So the student will present his work, 20-30 minutes, and after that, it will be question and answer. We will start off with a general question first, as I mentioned just now, and then we will go in detail chapter by chapter. Okay, we will go into chapter 1. Depends. Some some examiner, they are quite choosy, quite detailed. They want to ask all the questions. Some say that, okay, I have noted down all the general comment in the thesis. You can look at that later, but I have special question to ask you. Okay, so that will also happen. So we will go into chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and chapter 5. If chapter has to be, sometimes it depends. Sometimes we'll take long time on chapter 1. It depends on how you write. Actually, your thesis will tell us what we should ask. If your thesis is well written, then we don't have much question to ask, except to test you. But if your thesis is poorly written, then we will have lots of questions in order for us to understand what you do. And also to test your knowledge, whether you really understand what you do. Okay, so this goes back to my earlier slide, why we do this VIVA, to test your knowledge, to check all those procedures, are they correct or not. So that will go detailed chapter by chapter. And after we finish chapter 5, we will go for abstract, English and Malay, and then we will look at the title. Sometimes the title need to be changed, sometimes it doesn't have to be changed, or sometimes it has to be improvised. So that will be decided later on. So don't worry. This many things can happen during the VIVA. Okay, sometimes some of the write-up need to be moved from this chapter to this chapter. Sometimes especially some students, they write their literature review, they put their literature review in the chapter 3, which is methodology. Sometimes we ask them to rearrange their methodology if it is not clear. Many things will happen during the VIVA, and that totally depend on your thesis. Okay. And then after we finish all the questions, how long will it take? Depends. But these days, it will take maybe around 2 to 3 hours. In the old days, it can go up to 2 days. Yeah, in the old days, it can go up to 2 days. Up in the evening, finish, oh, it's not finished yet. So then we will continue again next day. Or then they start the Viva in the morning, and then after lunch, we will continue again up to evening. But nowadays, most of the Viva which I attended are quite short. It's either the whole morning or the whole evening. So it can be 2 hours, it can be 3 hours, and sometimes, but not all the time, 4 hours is quite rare. Okay, so 2 to 3 hours. Whether we like or we don't like, it will be around that. If we don't like the thesis, it will also 3 hours. If we like the thesis, maybe it can be 2 hours or less. Okay. So after the question and answer, we will ask the student to leave again. And if we feel that there is a need for us to know, to have the supervisor in, we will allow them, and then we will make our discussion for the final decision. This discussion can be short, it can be long. Okay. During the pre-viva discussion, sometimes we set the supervisor in, maybe because we want to ask about the student from the supervisor. How is the student? Is he good? Is he because sometimes when we found that the thesis is a little bit sloppy, we want to know the reason behind the poor quality of the thesis, so we will invite the supervisor. Okay, so whether the supervisor is allowed or not depend on the needs of the discussion. So then we have this discussion, and then we decide, okay, the student passed the Viva with certain grade, which I will explain later. And after that, we will call the student, we will announce them the verdict. Okay, you pass your Viva with correction. You pass your Viva without correction. You pass your Viva, but you have to resubmit your thesis with Viva again. You have to reviva again. That is also possible. So then that will be announced after that. So if the student pass the Viva, so we congratulate them, and then normally we will have photo session. Okay, this is my last photo session. Online also we got photo session. Of course, physical also we have photo session. Some university they have photo session wall after Viva, but SKA does not have that yet. Maybe later after finish COVID. Okay. Okay. Some tips, preparedness and etiquettes. So be calm and confident as you begin your Viva. Okay, don't panic. And the examiner normally will try to comfort you, ask you some general question. Where are you from? How long have you done your PhD or master? Are you married or not? So all those questions to calm you down. Then you can introduce yourself. Okay, be smart but also humble. This is important. Examiner like to see humble. We like to see humble, but we don't want them to be what do you call it? To lay back. We want to see their passion. We want them to be excited, to see their excitement, but we expect them to be humble as well. Okay, address the chairman and the examiners politely. Say thanks to your supervisor. If you do not know the answer, always you can actually, there's nothing wrong to say I do not know or not sure. Okay, but if that is something that you should know and you say you do not know, then you of course will be commented by the examiner. But if you do not know and you try to play smart, and this is detected by the examiner, that is also bad. Okay, so that is why important for us to prepare, but at certain circumstances, if we do not have the answer or not sure, then be honest. And if the Viva session is too long and you require some short break to go to the toilet or to drink some water, just request so. Okay, tell the examiner you want that short break. When I did my PhD, my VIVA, when I was in UK, my VIVA is supposed to start, if I'm not mistaken, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But at that time, if the VIVA start at 1, and if we finish the VIVA, during the climate at that moment, I will not be able to pray my Zohor. So I requested my supervisor beforehand, is it possible for me to have a break so that I can pray my Zohor? But considering my request, the supervisor said that nobody has ever asked that request before. So he said, in that case, it is okay for us to delay the Viva. So they delay the Viva so that I can pray my Zuhur and then start my Viva. And then at the end of my Viva, because that is during winter, the period for Zuhur and Asar is quite short. And after the Viva, I quickly go for my Asar prayer. So you can make a request if there is any any necessity. Don't get defensive and offensive. Okay, don't be defensive actually, or anything that the examiner say, you try to overcome them. That is not good. The examiner will not like that. Again, this go for your humbleness. Okay, of course, accept that. And if you think you have something that you want to defend it politely. Okay, in certain areas, there are people who stand out in that area. Okay, when we mention that name, that researcher, everybody's in that field now. So try to make yourself, this area, because sometimes the examiner will ask you, have you reviewed the work from certain people whom they feel are the author of this area? So you should be able to say, okay, I've done all this. Okay, so make sure you know who are the main author in that area that can be a good reference for your work. And of course, your supervisor, as I said just now, cannot assist you, and you should not also ask him to assist you. Only he feels there's a need for you to for him to say something, he will request from the chairman. And pay careful attention to the question so that you will give the correct answer. Some more tips. Okay, ask for clarification if you don't understand the question. Don't be shy. Take time to think the question before you answer. Okay, and you can also have a discussion with the examiner. Okay, you can also have discussion, but of course, this all need to be done in a humble and polite manner. Be prepared to discuss your research in context of other work done in your field. Again, admit if you do not know, and you feel free to express your own opinion. Things that you must not do during the Viva: not well versed with the thesis and the subject matter. Okay, this is very bad. You're not well versed with your thesis content. That is worse. So that is why preparation is important. Show lack of confidence by looking at you, the way you give your presentation. They will know that you are not confident. So don't show them. Hide them. This is bad. Never argue with examiners. Okay, never argue with examiners. I have experienced this in my Viva as examiner, where student doesn't seems to accept the argument or the recommendation by the examiner. This is very bad. At the end of the day, we have to warn him by saying that if you don't do what we say, we will fail you. When we have to come out with that phrase, it means that we are angry with the student. Okay, never argue with the examiner, and don't, if you want to discuss with the examiner, make sure that you listen to the examiner first, don't interrupt them. That is very rude. Okay, recently I have that kind of experience where the students feel like he is better than the examiner, and before even the examiner finish the question, he cut off. I mean, he intervened. So that is very bad attitude. Okay, so make sure you are polite, don't argue with the examiner, listen to them, and if there is nothing wrong for you to accept their comment, just say, okay, I will do the correction accordingly. That will smooth out the process. And never answer, why, when we ask you, why do you do this? Oh, because my supervisor asked me to do it. That is not supposed to be an answer. Although it is correct that your supervisor asks you to do it, but it is your responsibility to justify why your supervisor asks you to do it. And your answer should be based on that justification, not by saying, this is the order from my supervisor. Okay? That is a wrong answer. Okay? This is again being offensive or defensive. Okay. After we have passed through the VIVA session, then we invited the student to come back to the room or to the apps. Then we will announce the results. So the results after 3 years of efforts for PhD or 2 years of effort for the master. The result for master I don't have yet, but they have a different set of results. Please forgive me, I forgot to take them, but I have here for the PhD, but the nature is about the same. Okay, so there are 7 grade. 7? Yeah, 7 grade from A to E. If you fail, you get E, and you are not asked for thesis defense. Okay? One moment. If there is no correction, then you are given 3 weeks to touch up and then submit your thesis to PSPS. And whatever you, the correction is very minimum. Whatever correction is to be verified by the supervisor. If you get B1, the maximum correction used to be 1 month, but now they are giving it up to 3 months. The verification will be done by the supervisor. If you are given B2, you are given 6 months to do the correction, and it will be verified either by internal examiner or external or both. But in most cases, internal examiner will do the verification unless if we feel there is a need for external also to verify the thesis. If you have C1, this you will be given 12 months, and you have to submit your thesis again, and the thesis will be re-examined by the examiner, both internal and external, and you have to pay certain amount of fee for thesis resubmission. Okay, from C1, there is additional fee for this resubmission. If it is C2, the time is also 12 months. But here we have VIVA again. And again, there is additional fee for that. If your results is D, means that you are not awarded PhD, but you are given a master degree. Okay, and the maximum time for you to improve your thesis is 3 months, and this will be verified by your supervisor. Okay, if you if you see, we have here all those maximum. It means that 3 months for B1 is the maximum amount. If you fail to submit your thesis by 3 months, you will fail your PhD. Okay? Or if you fail your thesis, you get B2, and you fail to submit your thesis by 6 months, you will fail your PhD. There is no more, there is no mercy. UTM is very strict on that. So make sure if you have 3 months or 6 months or whatever time you have, try to submit them as soon as possible. Do not delay. Okay, so that is the results that you will get from your VIVA, and that all depend from your thesis, which we will finalize during the VIVA session. So thesis correction, grade A is just a few spelling mistakes. Grade B1 and B2 require rewriting and rephrasing. Grade C1 or C2 requires additional chapters or a significant portion of the write-up need to be redo, and then you need to resubmit. And correction will be based on the chairman report, the examiner's report, and on the evaluated thesis from the examiners. So before you submit your thesis correction, along with your thesis correction, you have to come up with a list of correction. You will have a list of a table which lists what are the comments from the chairman, what are the comments from internal, what are the comments from the external, and you have to write down again what improvement have you made from that comment. If you feel that the comment is baseless, you can also make your own justification. Not necessarily all the comments have to be accepted by student. If you feel that that comment is not valid, justify why you see that comment is not valid. Okay, that is supposed to be listed in that table. Okay, so in that table, when the examiner later on look, okay, he will see, okay, this is the correction needed. Now this is the new version. Where can I look at it at what page? So it has to be completed, a complete table which have the chairman report, examiner report, and possibly this comment from evaluated thesis also can most of the time be found in examiner's report. Unless the examiner explicitly mentioned that please refer to the thesis, then you have to look at the thesis properly. Okay, ensure your corrections are correctly done. So take notes during the VIVA and write them up immediately. And of course, they are also to be in the reports, especially in the chairman report. Then discuss with your supervisor how to do the correction. And as I mentioned just now, prepare a table listing down all the corrections. Analyze the report and evaluated the thesis carefully and look at all the issues are being covered in your new thesis and your table. And if you have not proofread your thesis, if there is so much error in your English, then better to have it proofread by a professional agency. And ensure that your supervisor have read your corrected thesis before you submit to SPS. There is a form that your supervisor need to sign to make sure that he has already checked your thesis before you submit to SPS, and then SPS will send the thesis to the examiner. Okay, it's not that you send the thesis to the examiner, you send the thesis, the new thesis, corrected version, after signed by your supervisor, to SPS, and then SPS will send your thesis to the examiner. So that is how it works. Okay, so I think this is the last slide, about almost 2 hours. So the conclusion is that actually, although our topic is supposed to be VIVA preparation, but as you can see from my discussion just now, it all starts from the beginning. Start from your literature, from your literature review, start from your proposal submission, and you're doing your work. It started from there. It is not that you should worry your VIVA after you submit your thesis. You should worry your VIVA during your PhD work, because the VIVA is just to verify what you have done and what you reported in your thesis. So start from the beginning. And again, as I mentioned just now, write your thesis well. Okay, write your thesis well. And okay, what happened? One moment. Oh. Know your thesis thoroughly. Prepare well after you submit. Be confident but humble. And of course, after you make so much effort, pray well. Okay, so I think that's all for my presentation today. These are some of my references, the few tops one for the presentation, and the few for the third last one is on some references on how to survive your VIVA, including one from School of Postgraduate Study. Okay, thank you very much. Any question? So I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much to our speaker, Prof. Asmi, to deliver the meaningful presentation and sharing the knowledge with us. So now it's time for the Q&A session. So there are some of the questions to Prof. Asmi from the floor, and please allow me to read it up. So the first question is, Prof, if
Yes.
we have numbers of a publication during the PhD and master by research, can we assure that we are safe during the voice process?
Okay. Generally, you are safe because, but provided that the publication is in the refuted journal. Okay, if you just send it to any journal, that is not a guarantee. But if you send it a Q1, Q2 journal, it means that that material in the article has been verified. The novelty, because nowadays, if you go to Q1, Q2, they only look for the novel material. So in that case, the novelty of your work has been verified. But again, it will then depend on how well you write your thesis. Okay? If your thesis is not well written, you will pass. I believe you will pass because you have fulfilled the scope of your work for PhD. But still, you may have to do correction. So if you want to leave the VIVA session with minimum correction, if you want to score A1 or B1, A or B1, make sure that your thesis is well written. Okay? Any other question? I cannot hear you. You are mute, Julius. Unmute.
Okay. 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 For the second question is, how to maintain the eye contact and body language during the virtual VIVA? Hello, Prof.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. The second question is how to maintain the eye contact or and the body language during the virtual VIVA session.
What's that again? What's the question again?
How to maintain the eye contact and the body language
Okay.
during the virtual VIVA session.
Okay. Actually, the one that I mentioned about eye contact is more on the physical VIVA. For virtual, I don't think there is any way for you to have the eye contact with the examiner. And even in any presentation, you won't be able to see them, and sometimes you even have to turn off your video because of the bandwidth.
So for the third question is, how to politely to answer if the examiner asks about the other parameters or topic that we are not covered. Means that the one we mentioned in the recommendation.
Uh, do you mean that you cannot answer, or the question is not relevant to your field?
Yeah, I think these participants is quite is try to ask that okay, if somehow the panel or the examiner ask something is out of the parameters and
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. You can say I'm sorry,
Mhm.
but uh, uh, I think the parameters or the field being asked is without is out of the scope of my work. And to answer that, one thing I forgot to mention, in your chapter 1 of your thesis, you will have scope of work.
Mhm.
You have introduction, you have problem statement, you have objective, and you also have scope of work. So this scope of work, it is not summarized of your methodology. Scope of work is to tell it, the style of its writing is to tell the readers that this is the boundary of my work. My work is only working in this, for example, I only use, my work is only on lab scale. I only use synthetic wastewater. So this will tell them, oh, okay, you are not working in real wastewater, for example, in my case. So by telling them, then they should know that if they have anything other than that, then that is beyond your scope. Or maybe there are some parameters that you have not tested during your work, and so this should be mentioned in your scope, that the study involve what parameters. So although you don't say that you don't test this, but by saying this is what I do, then it's supposed to tell the reader that this is the boundary of my work. Okay, so sometimes, of course, if there are some questions that is not relevant to you, you can say that I am sorry, but I feel that the question is not relevant to what to my PhD work. But I feel blah blah blah. You can give some general answer as well. Okay.
Okay, for the next question, uh, does publishing your study results is a highly impact in a highly impact journal give you an added value to your studies? So the university regulation allowed us to publish our final result before the VIVA.
Oh, okay. So you are of course encouraged to publish your work before the Viva. You are encouraged. This is, I mean, this is a big plus to you actually. As I mentioned just now, where if especially if you publish in a good journal, this actually show how good student you are. Okay, how good student you are and how good is that work that it has been accepted. Okay, there is nothing wrong in writing the thesis on the published work, except that you cannot refer your work in your writing. You should not refer, when you write your thesis, you should not refer to your own publication.
Mhm.
Understand? It is assuming that when you write your thesis, it's assuming that you have not published anything. But of course, you publish, but never refer the thesis to your own publication. Especially, for example, especially if you are doing your PhD, so you during your PhD work you have published something. So in writing your PhD thesis, you cannot refer to that paper. But if your PhD work is a continuation from your master work, and from that master work you have published, you can refer to that paper from your master work. That is